Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a fascinating set of sources and aiming them directly at one of the most ingrained traditions we have, the timing of the first Christmas.
Mhm.
We have material here that uses, rigorous astronomical data and historical context to argue that the classic scene we all picture in our heads,
Mhm.
it's actually mixing up two different events.
It is. And our mission today, really, for you listening, is to use these sources, and they include some incredibly detailed planetary charts, to draw a clear line between the nativity scene, the actual birth,
Right.
and the much later presentation of the Magi.
hmm
We tend to treat them as happening all at once, but the stars, they seem to tell a very different story.
That blurring is the whole issue, isn't it? We've all seen the nativity sets. You've got the shepherds and the wise men all kneeling together at the manger.
Everyone's there for the party.
Exactly. But our primary source argues that this whole simultaneous scene is a tradition, something created by men and not really based on the original accounts at all.
That's right. The study's main goal is to map out the entire astronomical array, all the celestial events that spanned from the probable birth of Jesus, which the source places on a very specific date, September 11th, minus 3 BC,
Okay.
all the way through to the Magi's arrival, which it argues was on December 25th, minus 2 BC.
So that's a 15-month gap.
Wow.
That timeline is the key variable we need to unpack here.
It changes everything.
Let's jump right into that then. If the traditional December date is wrong for the birth, what evidence did the sources give to support a September date instead?
Well, you have to look at the practicalities of life back then. The source strongly suggests the Nativity happened on September 11th, minus 3 BC, which aligns perfectly with the Jewish Feast of Trumpets.
And the supporting evidence for that?
It comes from the environment itself. I mean, just think about the shepherds.
The sheep, right?
Exactly, the sheep. It's a fascinating agricultural detail. Shepherds would simply not have had their flocks out in the open fields in the dead of winter, in the cold of December.
No, it would be too cold.
Way too cold. By late autumn, those animals would be sheltered in corrals or stalls. The fact that the Gospels say the shepherds were abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. That makes so much more sense than the mild weather of September.
That strongly corroborates a fall birth then.
It really does.
And what about that famous line, no room in the inn? I think the common interpretation is just that Bethlehem was, having a busy week.
And it was. But the source gives a much more specific reason for that housing shortage. It argues the crowd wasn't just because of some Roman census, though that was a factor.
Okay.
It was primarily because the whole region was just swelling with people for the appointed feasts of Jehovah, specifically Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, which happens every fall.
So you've got this massive influx of religious pilgrims plus the census requirement. That would absolutely create a guaranteed housing crisis.
It connects the nativity timing perfectly to the Jewish liturgical calendar. It suggests the whole story begins in the fall, a time of gathering and harvest, not in the dead of winter.
Okay, so now let's pivot to the traditional date, December 25th. The source claims this is a significant date, but for the presentation of the Magi. It calls it the first Christmas.
Yes, but this happens much later. About 15 months later, on December 25th, minus 2 BC.
So why are the Magi visiting a toddler, not a newborn?
This is such a crucial distinction.
Mhm.
The gospel account is actually very clear on this. When the Magi finally arrive, they don't find the family in a manger or a stable.
No.
Now, the text uses the word house, which implies they were in a much more settled, different location in Bethlehem by then. The Magi were visiting a young boy, a toddler, who's about 15 months old.
So their journey took them over a year, tracking these celestial signs until they got the final destination marker. The source even pegs the time at exactly 470 days.
It does. So this entire image we have of the wise men immediately following a star to the manger, it needs a radical adjustment. They were observing, charting, traveling for a long time.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What celestial event is powerful enough to peg the specific date, December 25th, and draw these Magi to that precise location 15 months later?
It all comes down to one planet, Jupiter, which was known in many ancient traditions, especially Jewish tradition, as the planet of the Messiah, the king planet.
Right.
The source asserts that the December 25th date is anchored solely to the astronomical moment when Jupiter appeared to literally stop in the sky, right over the town of Bethlehem.
I think we need to slow down there because a planet doesn't just stop. What does that actually mean?
That's right. It's an optical illusion from our perspective here on Earth. It's called retrograde motion.
Okay.
Imagine Earth and Jupiter are two runners on a circular track. Earth is on an inner, faster lane. So there are times when we essentially lap Jupiter. As we speed past, from our point of view, Jupiter appears to slow down, move backward against the stars for a while, and then stop again before it moves forward.
So the Magi were watching that whole backward loop. And the stopping they saw, the destination marker, was Jupiter becoming stationary right at the end of that backward part of the loop.
Precisely. That specific moment, December 25th, minus 2 BC, was when the planet was stationary, just before resuming its normal path. And what's really fascinating is that this retrograde motion was happening within the constellation of Virgo.
Virgo, the Virgin.
Yes, so you have this symbolism of the king planet being sort of held or guided by the Virgin. The appearance of the star of the king, literally standing still over Bethlehem, is the physical event that told them, you've arrived.
That makes the whole story feel so much more purposeful
Yeah.
and scientific. But they didn't just stumble on this one event. You said they were tracking a sequence. What were the earlier signs?
They were professional astronomers, so they were tracking a whole series of what you could call royal signs. They were heavily focused on conjunctions. That's where planets appear really close together in the sky.
And these involved Jupiter and what else?
Jupiter and the star Regulus, which was known as the king star.
A king planet meeting a king star.
Exactly. And it all happened in the constellation of Leo, the lion, another powerful royal symbol tied to the tribe of Judah. They saw a rare triple conjunction of Jupiter and Regulus.
Wow.
It happened on 3 dates, September 14th, minus 3 BC, then February 17th, minus 2 BC, and finally May 9th, minus 2 BC. That sustained dance between the king planet and the king star, and the sign of the king, was the signal that started their whole journey.
So they saw the announcement and then they followed its progress. They also saw Jupiter-Venus conjunctions, right? The source mentions those.
Yes, the king planet with the mother planet. They saw a double conjunction of Jupiter and Venus, also in Leo. The entire sky was, for them, a detailed celestial map.
And what was the final big cosmic announcement before Jupiter did its stop?
The signaling alignment. On August 24th, minus 2 BC, you had Jupiter, Venus, Mars, and Mercury, all in this extraordinary alignment right at the boundary line between Virgo and Leo.
Between the mother and the king.
Precisely. It was like the heavens were shouting, the king has arrived!
And we can't forget the eclipses. The source material mentions them as a kind of corroboration.
Yes, 4 solar eclipses happened in that 15-month span, including 2 hybrid eclipses, which are the rarest kind. But the one detail that really locks down the presentation date is the eclipse that happened right after the Magi arrived.
What was it?
A partial solar eclipse. It happened the very next day, on December 26th, minus 2 BC, in the constellation of Capricorn.
The timing is just astonishing. The heavens are mirroring the events on Earth almost immediately after the gifts are presented.
It's like the sky was providing this immediate stamp of validation. The source even suggests the eclipse in Capricorn, a sign sometimes linked to sacrifice, might have prophetically signaled that this child would ultimately become the sacrificial lamb.
Okay, so we've used the sources to build this strong astronomical case for the Magi's visit on December 25th. Now, the source completely shifts gears and uses this clarity to critique how we currently celebrate that date.
It does, and this is where it makes its most pointed claims against modern tradition. The study asserts that our current version of Christmas is based on the traditions of men and the Roman Catholic Church, not the Bible.
It even takes aim at the name Christmas itself.
It does. The study argues that the term Christmas is directly linked to pagan origins, tracing it back to a ritualistic mass performed at midnight for other deities.
And historically, we know that after Constantine, the Roman Empire did absorb a lot of pagan practices. They sort of Christianized them to make the transition easier for people.
That context is critical to the source's whole argument. It draws a really strong line connecting December 25th celebrations to ancient festivals like Saturnalia. The source even links these traditions to figures like Nimrod, who it calls the first Antichrist archetype in occult traditions.
So the argument is that many of the traditions we see as essential parts of Christmas today actually have origins completely separate from the worship of Jesus.
Absolutely. And the study gets very specific about which traditions should, in its view, be avoided. It cites Old Testament warnings, like in Jeremiah, against learning the ways of other nations.
And which traditions does it single out as being problematic?
Well, it lists Santa Claus, Yule logs, mistletoe, and especially the Christmas tree. The study describes the tree as an ancient pagan practice, historically linked to fertility symbols, like adorning it with eggs.
And it even offers a symbolic reading of modern Christmas tree decorations.
Yes, it claims that things like serpentine glitter are meant to echo the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and connect to Luciferian motifs like the Kabbalah tree of life. The argument is that these symbols are fused into the holiday to usurp the worship meant for Jesus.
And the source has a pretty provocative point about Santa Claus, too, doesn't it?
It really does. The study basically asked, what is the connection between the birth of Christ and a red-dressed man who invades homes like a thief in the dead of night? It uses these really intense examples to encourage people to separate the biblical account from later cultural additions.
So, after all that, what does this mean for you, the listener? We've got the astronomical facts and the critique of tradition. The source does offer a path forward, right?
It does. That's the key synthesis. The astronomical evidence suggests that the first Christmas on December 25th, -2 BC, was not about the birth.
Right, that was 15 months earlier.
It was solely about the worship and the presentation of gifts to the King of the universe by the Magi.
Which offers a clean resolution. You can feel confident celebrating December 25th if your focus is strictly on worship and gift-giving, modeled after the Magi, while consciously filtering out the other elements.
That's the essential distinction. And the ultimate purpose of their visit wasn't just symbolic. It was to give worship and to present those three specific gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And the source notes those gifts were the essential resources needed to fund the flight to Egypt. It was
Wow.
a provision they needed for that mandatory life-saving journey.
And that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Knowledge really is the greatest gift. We've used these sources to try and separate human tradition from astronomical fact, hopefully giving you a new layer of clarity on this.
And as you think about that incredible precision, consider this final thought. If the timing of the Magi's arrival was so astronomically determined, down to Jupiter stopping on that exact day, and if that timing provided the resources for the flight to Egypt at the exact moment they were needed, what does that imply about the prophetic significance of all three gifts? Gold for a king's resources, frankincense for worship, and myrrh for his eventual burial, all provided the precise moment the family needed them to survive and fulfill the next step in the prophecy. It suggests a celestial clock, ticking down not just to a birth, but to the very moment those resources were required.